Hi, everyone. So I'm going to tell you actually a bit of a love story today because I love building prototypes. And I actually believe that we can prototype anything, not just mobile apps, not just websites, but truly anything. So first of all, I'm going to show you the end product of what we built, and then we'll go back a few steps and see how we built it. So forgive the cheesy music. This is our marketing video about this project. I'm just going to talk over it. Especially forgive the cheesy slow motion footage of me walking into the store. It gets a little bit better. But what we did here was we were challenged actually by one of our clients to build a interactive video wall. So you can see that, and it's actually not just one of them. There are about 30 of these now deployed across Canada. As you can probably guess, when you have 16 55-inch big challenge here was to actually prove out whether or not this could work and whether or not it could be built from a technical feasibility point of view as well as a usability point of view. So I'm going to skip ahead here and really talk about how we went about doing that prototype and how to prototype things that go beyond just mobile apps and websites and the typical. So this is our first prototype. It cost about 30 cents, I think, because there were 12 pieces of paper and a little bit of ink. We had to guess roughly how much the budget was. It took us about 45 minutes. Our goal here was to say how quickly can we actually simulate what this wall, this interactive video wall will do, and have users actually interact with it. So it was pretty quick. The second version of the prototype happened in that afternoon where we added in a projector. So we borrowed a projector, so I'm not including that in my budget. And I'm saying it was still pretty cheap. So right away, this is pretty useless, right? It's just a few pieces of paper on the wall. But our first assumption was that when someone walked up to this screen, they would intuitively know what to do. So the first lesson we learned was very, very low fidelity, and really just have that scrappy hacker mindset and be creative about how you build a prototype. It doesn't have to use even a digital interface right away. This is where things went really bad, really early. On the second or third day, we actually invited about 15 people who were not familiar with the objectives into the room, into this lab. I say lab, it was someone's office actually. And we had our 16 pieces of paper representing 16 different products from this sports store up on the wall. And we asked them to select one of the products. Almost all of them did it wrong. They walked up to the screen and they put their hands on the wall. Okay. So we learned really quickly. We really, really failed. But it was great because it was on the second day. So we realized we actually had to cue our users. So we got our first learning on the second day of a project that was meant to be about 5 weeks long. So we started testing really, really early. Actually, on the first day, we were already doing some testing, and we did it really often. So every single day, we had people in. Eventually, we ran out of people in our office who hadn't used it before, so we actually just went out on the street. We had a bunch of $5 gift cards for Starbucks, and we just asked people to come into our office to spend 10 minutes with us testing out a new system, and then we found people who were unfamiliar with it. I say soul-crushing results. They're actually good results. That early failure is a great thing. Don't worry, we had lots more failures as we went on. Eventually, we hooked up the projector and we used a Microsoft Kinect to interact with people. This is where we got into more of the proof of concept. So now we had to say, yes, there's some usability issues, but we think we can overcome that. Then we had to figure out, can this thing actually possibly even work? And at first, the answer was no. Where the cameras were meant to be installed, we couldn't actually differentiate someone's gestures. So if they happened to be left-handed, for example, the system wasn't going to work. I'm not left-handed, so I didn't really think it was a problem, and it wasn't until someone came in and said, nope, it doesn't work, and we realized 1 out of every 10 users wouldn't be able to use this system. it's probably not an acceptable result. So during this proof of concept stage, we're able to get more of that early validation and more of that early failure. So that's where some of those biases kind of come into play. And so we are able to take those assumptions that we had and essentially prove that they were all wrong. We had more of those types of challenges the second we had anyone who was shorter in. Again, we designed the system for people who were, let's say, average human height, and then suddenly we actually brought a few children into the room. First of all, the children actually perceived what to do with the system much, much faster than the adults, which was a fantastic learning because some of these systems were going to be installed in the children's department. The unfortunate thing was that at first, the geometry of the way the Microsoft Connect worked didn't actually embrace children's behavior. So right away, again, that early testing and early validation helped us learn those results. Eventually, we got through some of that, and we went to the store, and we started building the first system. This was really fun. This photo was taken pretty early on in the night, I would say maybe 1 a.m. We couldn't start working until the store had closed at 10 p.m., so it was pretty late at night. This is where we actually had to figure out the actual geometry of the system, calibrate the cameras, install everything. And then this happened. This was just a mistake. I guess one of our MAC addresses that we had provided to the store to allow us onto the network was typed in incorrectly. Now at this point it's 2 a.m. We tried calling some people, they didn't answer. We're alone in a shopping mall. We don't even have food. But we learned really quickly, we again took that hacker mindset, we were able to set up some crazy cell phone routing. It was beyond me from a network point of view, but we were able to move it forward and start testing. And so this is how the first test looked. And there's actually audio on here that makes it more fun. I'll warn you, it's not great. And there's music in the background because it's now 3 or 4 a.m. and we're just getting very, very, very tired.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not bad. A little bit delayed.
Yeah. Nice. Back. Yeah.
It's really not working anymore. So that's roughly where the system started to break down. So the reason I'm showing you all this is not to show how bad we are at building these. To me, what's really important here is that when the slide advances, anything can go wrong. But the beauty is that this is still a prototype. This was a 5-week project, and we're still only in the 2nd week. And we had learned so much along the way by being really, really creative in how we used the hardware and how we essentially modeled out the system without doing massive investments. The company that we were working for actually had previously attempted to build the system, but they didn't build in a lab. They went into a boardroom, designed everything down to its every minute detail, and then hired a company to build it. That company spent almost $1 million, or cost them almost $1 million, and in the end wasn't able to actually achieve it. So we were really proud because on day 8, we actually had our client come into the store here and test it out. It wasn't perfect. It was by no means perfect, but what was really important to us was that we had all the learnings. And so if anyone here has read Lean Startup or familiar with Lean Startup, you know it's all about validated learning. So by keeping an open mind and being embracing of failure as quick as possible and really, really looking for everything that can go wrong and finding that and pulling it forward, we were able to find those opportunities to innovate. So here's the recap for you. The first piece was really by taking a very, very low fidelity approach to prototyping, we can save time and we can find the problem areas quickly and then see, does it even make sense to go on? Testing early and often, and then really don't be afraid of the results. Too often we make excuses of why a certain result happens rather than actually embracing, yep, this is the reality, this is the nature of technology, this is the nature of our users' behavior, We have to embrace it and design around it rather than making excuses. So very, very often in my work, and I'm sure many people here have heard this before, we'll do some usability testing with a user, and the result won't be what we expected. And then we start making excuses. You know what? This person just doesn't understand it, or it's not the right user, or maybe let's ask someone else and see if they get it right. Versus actually admitting that there might be a flaw in the usability of your design. The third piece was to try to avoid bias and validate your assumptions. I truly believe it's impossible to remove all of your biases, but that's why we try to test so early and so often with as many different people as we can to try to reduce that. And the fourth part is really just to have an open mind. Realize that things will go wrong, especially in digital, especially when you're building 6-meter wide video walls that have never been done before. The final piece is actually, to me, the most important. This is a part of our formula with our clients. We tell them when to stop. This was really, really difficult to do. On day 8, we had now tested this prototype, and we said, yes, there are some small hiccups in terms of lag on performance and calibration, but it's a prototype. And the purpose of a prototype, and we have to remind our clients day in and day out, the purpose of a prototype is that it's a learning tool. We build it to break it. We build it to test it. We build it to learn from. We're not building a set of instructions. We're designing a set of instructions that we're going to build a final product from. In fact, when we built the final product, we didn't reuse any of the code from the initial prototype, mostly because that code was terrible. The code was not commented, it was not clean, it used all kinds of dirty, hacky secrets and tricks just to make it work. But what was amazing for us was we could go to our client, and this happened on the end of the 8th day out of 5 weeks. So out of 25 days on day 8, we said, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I think we're done. We've learned what we're going to learn. We could keep working on this prototype and make it prettier or nicer or smoother, but you're not going to learn anything new. And we would actually suggest to stop paying us, take what we've done, and then build your plans for building it out at scale. The person who runs sales at our company is not happy when I go and tell clients to stop paying us early, but the clients love it, and it's really, really important because it's an honest, authentic approach, I think. So, black screen. I think there's other things we can prototype. I don't think it just has to be digital systems, and in fact, one of the most fun experiences I had recently was doing some work as part of a workshop where we were doing design for the National Health Service of the UK, and it was in particular for the blood donation and blood transport group. So there's some interesting things that happen when it comes to blood donation, in particular in the UK. Some of the statistics were that about 12% of the UK population comes from a Black Caribbean descent, but only 1% of the blood supply in the donor pool comes from that same descent. Blood transfusions happen to be more effective and have a higher likelihood of success if they come from the same ethnographic background. So we were challenged actually to design services for blood donor clinics and for the blood and transport organization. It was really fun. And this is, I promise, a real photograph. I took it. It's not a stock post-it note photo. This was a workshop that we actually ran with the National Health Service. And we were doing more of a service design approach to changing that intended behavior. What got really cool was we got to prototype it. We actually spent time in blood donor clinics prototyping our solutions and testing them with real users. We used sort of the design sprint methodology. Everything was done in 1 week, and on day 4 and day 5, we were actually in clinics with real donors, real nurses, real doctors, actually talking to them about different approaches and trying them out and seeing what worked. Trying out different communication strategies, different incentives for people to donate blood, and a whole bunch of tools like that. So this is as we're now starting to share some of the results through familiar tools to you guys, personas, customer journey maps, things like that. But what I really wanted to share out of this is that prototyping can apply to anything. One of my favorite prototyping tools, Lego. Has anyone used Lego for service prototyping before? It works so well. You've got tiny little people, you've got tons of creativity, and you can actually model out. So we actually built a prototype of what a rearranged layout of a blood donor clinic would look like that was more user-centric. Because the first thing that happened when you walked into a blood donor clinic in this particular part of London is you saw curtains. And it was very, very closed off, and it had a very scary appeal. And again, that wasn't us. That was talking to users and bringing them into the clinic and asking them what they thought, and watching their body language, watching their reactions. So rather than moving all the furniture around, buying new curtains, tearing curtains down, we built a Lego model. And we started bringing that around and saying, well, what if the layout looked like this? And in fact, they've actually started to implement some of these changes. They've refined it. They built it not out of Lego. I'm not sure what the second version of the prototype looked like, but it's a really, really great prototyping tool. Some of the other tools you have in the world of service design, which is sort of my background, storyboards. Video can be fantastic, where you can mock up a service experience and actually use that to illustrate what the experience might look and feel like. All different kinds of physical models. Typically, we stay away from 3D rendering and things like that because they're actually very time-consuming. I promise you, no matter how good you are at using 3D modeling tools, I can build it in Lego faster. And if you want to simulate the actions of what goes through, I guarantee you I can move my little Lego person through my model much faster than you can create a 3D animation. If anyone actually wants to try that, we could do that this afternoon. That'd be fun. Yeah, so these are some of the tools when it comes to service prototyping. And so I guess just to wrap up, I wanted to share with you that it's not just about prototyping large-scale systems. It's about prototyping anything and seeing how quickly can we get the fundamental learnings and the validated learnings in order to build the best product or service in the end. One of the coolest service prototypes I've ever seen was actually done, this is for Boeing, and the work was done by IDEO. It's a little bit more expensive than a Lego prototype, but it is a lot less expensive than an airplane. So what they did here is actually they were modeling different service experiences, or they were playing around with the depth and ratio of seat numbers, basically simulating everything about air travel. And the participants in these experiments, they didn't just come in for 5 minutes. They sat there for 2, 3, 12, 14, 16 hours. Depending on which flight they were actually trying to simulate, they tried to recreate it as close as possible to the end experience. I tried to find out, I spoke to a few friends at IDEO actually, how much they paid the participants. I couldn't find it out. I don't know what you would have to pay me to sit in this room for 16 hours in an airplane seat. I'm very tall, but I just thought it was a really great example of extreme service and product prototyping that illustrates how quickly we can get to that learning and get to those results. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.